Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on Daily with Doc. My name is Becca Dukes, and I am excited to be able to bring information that is empowering, information you may not hear somewhere else, but it's information that gives you, as an individual, more control than what you think when it comes to what you yourself can do in regards to your health and wellness, not just yours, but your family. And as we work together, we will be making a difference around the world. Now, today you're in for a special treat. Dr. Wallach has requested that we play an interview that he did in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in 2020. So just before everything started to shut down, he was out and about traveling, doing live presentations, and this was one of the last sessions, interviews, I should say, live that he had. And we are excited to be able to share it with you with the permission of the individuals who actually filmed this presentation. Now, if somebody invited you to this program, please make sure that you get back with them and let them know that you made it, and let them also know what interesting fact you heard that you did not know already. Now, if you are out on any of the stream channels or watching the replay, please let us know that you are there by liking, loving, sharing, following. And we just really believe in this message and want to make sure that people are able to hear it. And as a thank you from me to you for sharing this program, make sure that you go to dwdgiveaway.com. That's dwdgiveaway.com and register for our giveaway. Then you will be earning points as you share. So without further ado, everybody sit back. You are in for a great treat as we present to you a day with Doc.
I was going to start this big project for the National Institutes of Health, doing autopsies. It was 1967 and just came back from Africa. And Perkins gave me this list. He says, here's a list of things that I personally want you to do while you're doing this project for the NIH. And I looked at it, and the first thing on the list was, why are all the bears, regardless of species, all over the world dying from liver cancer? And he says, the biologists say it's a genetic thing. What do you think? And I said, well, it's certainly not a genetic thing. If every species all over the world of bears are dying of liver cancer. I said, but I think I know what it is. He says, well, you haven't even seen any of the slides, nothing. Well, there is a particular fungus that actually causes liver cancer. It's called aflatoxin. It's very common in peanuts, and most bears sell peanuts at the zoos so people can throw them to the bears, so they can stand up and they take pictures of them waving at the crowd to get attention so they can get the peanut. So let's culture some of these peanuts from around these zoos around the world. And we can also, if you take a ultraviolet light and go in the dark and go to these peanuts in the barrel or the drum or the basket and put that ultraviolet light on it, if there's this aflatoxin in there that causes liver cancer, it'll glow in the night. It'll glow, okay, like a firefly. And sure enough, in all the zoos around the world, the peanuts they were feeding the bears had aflatoxin. They're all glowing. And we were able to make sure that all the zoos, when they would get peanuts to feed the animals in the zoo, they would put that ultraviolet light on and make sure that none with aflatoxin came in there. And we stopped the liver cancer epidemic in the bears around the world. One of the other things that would go on with that was the old bread, of course, was a thing they could buy cheaply. And, one loaf of bread would be 1,500 calories. And it was moldy bread, from the various bread companies would sell them to the zoos and so forth. And of course, we'd put that ultraviolet light on them. The bread would light up because the mold on the bread were the cousins to the mold on the peanuts, and they would also produce aflatoxins. So they had to give up the bread as well as the peanuts. So it was quite the story. And we made the front pages in the magazines and this and the other. And of course, it's in the book Epigenetics. It's in the book Dead Doctors Don't Lie. It's in the book Rare Hidden Cures, because it was a big story. And of course, the same thing is true for people. It'd be very interesting to find out what the percentage of liver cancer is on homeless people that get old bread, okay, given to them, which has mold on it, and they throw away the 2 or 3 slices of bread that have the mold on it, but that aflatoxin is seeped into all the other. I want to know what the rate of liver cancer is on the homeless people compared with middle class people who have a job and only buy fresh bread that doesn't have mold on it. That'd be very interesting. We actually switched the bears to dog food, dry dog food. We just had to get dry dog food that didn't have any gluten in it, and so we switched them to dry dog food. And remember, that was in 1967. We ended the bear liver cancer epidemic, and of course it's one of those things where I'm very, very proud of that. It's rare that one person's experience added to telephones and letters, and we didn't have emails and stuff like that back then. If they did, I didn't know it, and so it was all done by letters and phone calls. And just think of that. We were able to, and the best biologists in the world hadn't figured it out, and we're dealing with liver cancer in polar bears, Kodiak bears, black bears, sun bears, brown bears, every kind of bear you can think of, pandas, because they're all being treated the same diet-wise. And so it was quite the project. The results were stunning, and I was very, very proud of that. So I was just blessed, and we'll give the good Lord all the credit. And I was just so happy and proud that I was the instrument to make the good things happen. Well, one of the great rare and endangered species, of course, is the giant panda. And one of the reasons why it was rare and endangered in captivity in the zoos goes back to the beginning of zoos, hundreds of years ago, maybe even 1,000 years ago in the days of the Roman Empire. But people say, well, pandas never produce babies in zoos, and it's because they're so sensitive, and people are looking at them in the zoo, and well, what are you feeding them? Well, we're giving them bamboo just like they live on in the wild. And so I kind of looked it up, and I came back and said, well, the pandas eat more than bamboo. They eat bamboo, they eat rats, they catch birds, they eat eggs, they eat potatoes. I mean, they're kind of like a bear. They're omnivorous. They eat a lot of stuff. They eat a lot of little vertebrates that they can catch, including mice and squirrels and rabbits and all kinds of things. And so their diet is a lot more complicated than just giving them bamboo. So again, we began to, just like the bears, we began to give them dog food, and we kind of mix it up, dry dog food and the canned dog food. And within a year's time, all the zoos in Europe and all the zoos in North America are having babies. So again, like the bear thing, the liver cancer, the pandas breeding in captivity are based on just simple stuff that, again, the average person doesn't think about. They take from lack of experience and they go read, well, pandas live in the bamboo forest, and that's what they eat. Okay, and so they went out of their way and they did everything they could to get fresh bamboo sprouts for the pandas, but then it wasn't enough, didn't have enough nutrition to support conception and pregnancy. So again, we saved a class of animals based on just proper nutrition. Well, now the pandas are almost a burden in the zoos because they all have babies, and so they do have panda reserves in China, which we do cooperate, and the pandas get shipped to places where they don't have them in zoos, and also where they have the panda reserves in China. So the pandas are not endangered anymore because we've found how to make sure that they all have babies. At the Chicago Aquarium, the porpoises and dolphins were all having problems and dying of heart failure and this, that, and the other. And it comes down to, there's a certain kind of fish that has thiaminase in it. Thiaminase is an enzyme that destroys vitamin B1, thiamin. And thiamin deficiency causes congestive heart failure. And so, we're talking about sardines and things like that, and these small fish, which were easy for zoos to get and keep in the freezer, and the porpoises and dolphins loved them, and everybody was happy. And so we began to switch to different types of fish that did not have those thiaminase enzymes. We gave them the 90 essential nutrients, which all vertebrates need, including porpoises and dolphins, and we gave them extra of the thiamin, just in case some thiaminase got in there, and we ended all the congestive heart failure deaths in the porpoises in captivity. But why is this happening? Well, it turns out for years and years and years and years that aquariums had trouble keeping dolphins alive for long periods of time, particularly the ones that used those fish that had the thiaminase enzyme in the tissues, and nobody made that connection. Well, you have to appreciate, by the time that I got there, I'd already done 20,000 autopsies, and 17,000 and change of over 454 species of animals, including dolphins and porpoises and whales and so forth. So I was very familiar with whales of all sizes and species. And so it comes down to my training as a pathologist. And so when you have populations showing the same problem, it's going to be very easy to solve the problem. Now, to a geneticist, they say, well, it's a genetic thing. It's in all the dolphins. Well, no, there's other options here. What are they being fed? What do they drink for water? What is the water in the tank being cleaned with, and so forth? Are it just filters or chemicals or what? And so you have to look at the environment. You have to look at their food. And I have solved so many problems for domestic animals, also for so many animals in captivity, and this includes birth defects and so forth. So we're very, very proud of that. And basically, the problem was they were just being fed fish. Because again, they would ask a veterinarian, they would ask a doctor, and they'd say, oh, just feed them well and they'll get everything they need. And trying to keep expenses down, instead of giving them the 90 cents of nutrients, they would just give them the whole fish. Well, we're giving them the whole fish. That's what they eat out in the wild. Well, where those fish come from that have the thiaminase enzyme in the tissue, there's no dolphins and whales there in those places. Okay, and the people who eat those fish by catching them, with either a spear or a hook or a net or something, they're eating all kinds of other things. So eating three of those little fish twice a week is not a problem. But if they only ate those fish 3 times a day as their only meal, they'd have a problem with congestive heart failure just like the dolphins. When it comes to other animals, people always ask me, okay, what about big vertebrates, like cattle and horses and so forth? If they were having congestive heart failure, that would mean they're either getting some thiaminase enzyme somewhere, or they're getting fed food that didn't make those vitamins, okay? Thiamin. And so thiamin is actually made by grain. Okay, well, grain has its hazards because of the gluten in it. And so it's one of those things where they say, well, eat whole grains, you get vitamins. Well, yeah, you do, especially in the bran, but that's where most of the gluten is. And so that's not my first choice as a source of thiamin, okay? Especially in domestic livestock where they have no health insurance for the animals. We can send them to a cardiologist to get congestive heart failure. No. You give them all 90 essential nutrients. You give them a trace mineral salt block. And the need for medical care or veterinary care of livestock, such as, again, as cattle and horses and sheep and pigs and goats and poultry, chickens and turkeys and things, is almost zero, because they're getting all these nutrients in their supplement programs. And farmers do this without the need to go to a veterinarian. This is either what they learn in agricultural school, or the feed salesmen that go through those communities. They'll stop at every farm. They'll say, hey, you can reduce a lot of these health problems. Your calves will be better off and not have all these problems by giving the mothers these vitamins and minerals, and they come through the milk. And when the calves start eating whole foods, they need their own supply and so forth. And this is one of the reasons why I knew we could really take veterinary nutritional supplement programs and devise a similar program for humans, because all vertebrates require the same nutrients, and all vertebrates get the same diseases from the same deficiencies. So why wouldn't the processes we did with animals work on humans? And sure enough, it worked. One of the great areas that I learned from the animal industry and carried over into human life is that birth defects were fairly rare in livestock, cattle and sheep and horses and pigs and stuff like that. They occurred, but they occurred randomly. Maybe 2 farms in a county in Missouri might have this problem because those defects were caused by a mineral deficiency and they didn't have those minerals in the soil there, and they weren't supplementing in any particular way with that mineral, and that's why they had the birth defects. And the brothers and sisters of those same animals and 5 farms over didn't have any problems. And so the first one I ran into, which was really spectacular, I had graduated from veterinary school. I was kind of halfway through my degree in pathology from the University of Missouri. I went to Iowa State to finish it off. Marlon Perkins, before I got finished, he sent me to Africa to work on the White Rhino Conservation Project. And 2 years into that, he had me come back because he got this grant based on one of my research projects. $25 million to do those autopsies. One of the places I was working was at the Yerkes Primate Center in Atlanta, Georgia. These were the big NASA monkey colonies were, and I was a veterinarian and a pathologist there, and I was also working on human pathology at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. And I ran into the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis, supposed to be the classic example of a genetically transmitted disease in humans, cystic fibrosis. And I did my little review here, and it turns out I was able to get permission to do biopsies of the other 24 baby monkeys in the colony, all of whom had different mothers and fathers. There was 25 pairs of monkeys. Every one of them had babies at the same time. They kind of controlled the breeding dates, so babies are going to be born about the same time. And the first one that died, I got, in classic cystic fibrosis. I sent tissue around and to experts, and they said, "Oh, this is a classic example of cystic fibrosis." And I said, "Well, this happens to be from a monkey." "What? You found the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis?" So everybody was excited. And I was in every newspaper. Every day for 3 months. What a wonderful thing this was. And finally the scientist said, "Okay, Wallach, how long do you think it'll take with breeding of that one monkey and taking genes and doing artificial insemination and all this kind of stuff? Because we'll be able to get 100 baby monkeys to really do some research on cystic fibrosis." And I said, "Well, I can do better than that. I can give you 1,000 baby monkeys in 6 months. Because it's not a genetic disease, it's actually a nutritional deficiency of a single nutrient. And I can reproduce as many monkeys as you want." And they immediately fired me because they believed it was a genetic disease, and I was sniffing glue, and I was way off in the deep end, and this, that, and the other. But I had gotten permission to do biopsies of these other 24 baby monkeys. Well, guess what? They all had cystic fibrosis, even though they had different brothers or mothers and fathers. They were not genetically related to each other than they were monkeys, but they weren't cousins or anything like that, because the monkeys were from all over India, not just one little county or anything. And so I knew that it wasn't genetic. And so I started really studying cystic fibrosis hard in people. And sure enough, it's a very, very simple disease, easy to prevent. It's a deficiency really of two nutrients. One deficiency causes the pancreas and the liver disease. The other nutrition deficiency causes the respiratory problems, which are classic, usually the terminal event of kids with cystic fibrosis. So to make a long story short, I was able to come up with a program for that and went around the world and just gave lectures and so forth and came up with programs. And so today, these kids can live to be in their 70s and 80s and 90s. Back then, the average lifespan of these kids with cystic fibrosis was 5 to 7. They never lived past 12. And some of these places were the Amish, of course, the colonies. They had a high rate of cystic fibrosis. They also had a high rate of muscular dystrophy. Well, muscular dystrophy is very common in animals. It's called white muscle disease in animals, because when you butcher them, instead of having red muscle, like a steak, raw steak is red, okay, this would be white or yellow, okay, and they call it white muscle disease. Well, it was just muscular dystrophy in animals. They call it white muscle disease in animals and muscular dystrophy in humans. So we began to give the kids in the Amish communities that had muscular dystrophy and cystic fibrosis all 90 essential nutrients with more of that mineral, and we were actually reversing cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy within weeks and months. It was like crazy, okay? And so I took several of these files from kids that we had reversed their muscular dystrophy with and gave them to Jerry Lewis 2 years before he died, and say, "Jerry, this is for you. We have found the cause, prevention, and the ability to reverse muscular dystrophy, okay, using some animal studies, giving these kids these nutrients. And it turns out that muscular dystrophy is a nutritional deficiency. They can be born with it because mom's deficient, or they can be born normal, but because they have a gluten intolerance and can't absorb it, if they're supplementing, they can get muscular dystrophy. But it's a totally reversible and preventable disease." He got so excited, he took those records to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Remember, he was doing a telethon for 20 years, raising money for research in the genetics and all that kind of stuff in muscular dystrophy. And they fired Jerry Lewis and shut down the telethon. That's why you haven't heard anything about muscular dystrophy or cystic fibrosis in the last 10, 12, 15 years. There aren't any cases anymore. Every baby formula, by law now, has to have this nutrient in it. We're also able to end sudden death syndrome, crib death. Okay, the failed theory was the crib death was caused by mothers laying on the babies in the crib. Well, it turns out that only 2% of the babies who die of crib death are in bed with their mothers when they die. Well, they suffocate from the sheets and blankets. Well, I redid a lot of those baby deaths as far as autopsies, and none of them suffocated. They all died from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease, which is a deficiency of a single nutrient, the same nutrient deficiency that kills young athletes, 25,000 a year in America under the age of 20. I've done 1,700 autopsies on kids that have died of that. The English, it's in 3 languages. The English version is in the Journal of Trace Element Research. It's also in Mandarin and Cantonese. But at any rate, through federal court rulings that went in our behalf, because we've been after them for years and years and years, we were putting what we call kids toddy. It was a liquid multiple. We would have people put in their formulas because we knew they didn't have that nutrient in there. And sure enough, the rate of crib death was slowly going down. But we got this ruling April 16th, 2013, federal court, which required all manufacturers of baby formulas to put that nutrient in baby formulas within 3 months. A cover story, front page, the Charlotte Observer, which is the big page in Charlotte, North Carolina, big newspaper in Charlotte, North Carolina, just like New York Times in New York. They said, we don't know why, but crib death has vanished in the state of North Carolina. 3 months later, Missouri said the same thing. 3 months later, all states said, we don't know why, but the rate of crib death has dropped dramatically by 85 to 95% in our states. That's because baby formulas now had that nutrient in there. The reason why it was dropping slowly over the years before the court ruled to put that in baby formulas, we had our kids toddy, and people would come to our lectures, as being interviewed on TV and radio and so forth, and people knew to get that kids toddy and put it in their baby formulas to prevent sudden infant death syndrome, crib death, and also muscular dystrophy and cystic fibrosis. So we're very, very proud of all that. We had to sue the courts and everything because we were getting rulings ordering us to stop saying that we could prevent and reverse certain childhood diseases and adult diseases using vitamins and minerals, because doctors and hospitals and insurance companies and people who were geneticists would go to the courts and say, this guy's a veterinarian, he wasn't even a doctor yet. What are we talking about here? He's a veterinarian, and he's saying all these diseases we know of as a fact. And I mean, we got all these 10 professors from the university who say it's a genetic disease, and he's saying it's just a simple nutritional deficiency. And we don't want him to defraud all these people. And so I was able to prove to the courts that I was correct by having the records from the animals showing that the same disease under the microscope, because their experts couldn't tell whether it was from an animal or a human. Well, what would you say this is? Oh, that's muscular dystrophy. What would you say this is? Muscular dystrophy. Which one is an animal and which one is a human? Okay, well, they couldn't, because muscle is muscle under the microscope. So those are the sort of things that we were able to do over the years, and mostly it was legal stuff, okay? Because we knew we had the prevention, we knew we had the reversal, we knew it was diet and lack of nutrients. We knew from the animal studies and soil studies. I also have a degree in agriculture. Nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. They occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ice cream. Okay, that's why some places in the world people live to be 200. Some places in the world people only live to be 40. They could be first cousins. And that's because the nutrients are not found equally. Just like gold mines are not found equally around the world. That's why coal mines are not found equally around the world. Okay, silver is not found equally around the world. Same thing with nutritional minerals. Some simple ones like iron and zinc and stuff like that, but also some very exotic ones are not found equally around the world. The places where people live the longest are third world cultures. They don't have hospitals. I think this is the thing that got the judges the most. The people who lived the longest in the world were from third world cultures. The Hunzas around the Giltar Glacier in between Pakistan and China. They're the longest lived people in the world. They're in the top 19 out of the top 20 longevity cultures on Earth. They're third world. They have no doctors, no medical doctors from a medical school. They have no pharmaceuticals. They have no hospitals. And they didn't have any surgery, and they didn't have any health insurance. And yet they had 40 times 100-year-olds we Americans do. They had 100-year-old per 250 of their population, according to the United Nations, not me. And we only have 1 per 10,000 with all the medicine we have. And of course, right now, the Center for Disease Control in 2004 came out and said, our kids will be the first generation of Americans that do not live as long as their parents. That's a horrible failure of the medical system. If our kids are going to be the first generation of Americans that do not live as long as their parents, it's a horrible, horrible failure of the medical system. We have a lot of very, very talented lawyers and athletes and pastors, and even now we're getting people who are in the academic field who know we're quite correct. I've written so many scientific papers or in medical journals and scientific journals. We were given awards by the United Nations and all kinds of stuff. So it's, which I say, they may not like the fact that it's being shown that a lot of their beliefs and theories are incorrect. Okay, they don't like being told that. They continue to profess their false theories because, I can only sue, I only can afford to sue so many people. My priority was the birth defects in kids, and so I was so happy to get that nutrient put into baby formulas. We were able to essentially eliminate sudden death syndrome, muscular dystrophy, and cystic fibrosis. We did get qualified health claims over omega-3s because we were able to show that omega-3 deficiencies actually caused coronary thrombosis, blood clots in coronary arteries, thrombotic stroke, a blood clot in the brain, pulmonary embolism, blood clot in the lung, deep vein thrombosis in the legs. These are all caused by omega-3 deficiencies. And also, those deficiencies can also result in asthma and that kind of stuff. And so, it's hard to out-theorize 32,000 autopsies. Okay, in all my projects, I've done about 32,000 autopsies, all published. And so it's unimpeachable information. And so when you do 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10 that have died of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease, and you come up with the nutrient that's missing, 35% of those 1,700 had cystic fibrosis, 100% had muscular dystrophy, and 200 of them under the age of 1 year old had sudden death syndrome. And so it's one of those things where it's unimpeachable evidence. It's published in respected journals, and so doctors still pursue their theories because that's how they make their living. And that's why our children will be the first generation of Americans that do not live as long as their parents. Our animals are living longer and longer and longer and healthier. The cost to farmers of health care for livestock before they ship them to market is almost zero because they give them the nutrients. In 1958, I started out my academic career in agriculture. Went to the Department of Agriculture, University of Missouri, and 2 years into that, I applied for and got into veterinary school. And I kind of worked my way through veterinary school, working in the pathology department as a student assistant. And they, gave me a couple $100 a month, plus I got some credits towards a degree. If I ever wanted to do that, I got credits towards a university degree in pathology. And in December of 1961, I was 2 years into my pathology training, 6 months before I got my degree in agriculture, and a couple years before I got my degree in veterinary medicine, in wrestling and at the University of Missouri, on their team. So I was a busy boy, and everybody is out for Christmas vacation, because it's December. I was the new guy on the block in the pathology department, so all the advanced students and the professors were gone, and I ran into the first mass die-off in America from pollution. I'm sure it had happened before, but nobody paid attention to it. They brought me 50 lambs. These were feeder lambs. They were 6 months old. They were just 2 weeks from going to market. They were part of a flock of 500 lambs. All 500 died in one night. So they brought me 50. Opened up the first one, and as the blood came down over the wool, because they had 2 inches of wool, they were going to shear them and then send them off to market. And of course, they all died in that one night. Well, the blood came out of that lamb, and it looked like chocolate milk instead of blood, which is called methemoglobin. That's caused by nitrate poisoning. And so I said, okay, it's gotten some nitrates in the drinking water or the hay or something. So I just marked that down. And then I got up into the neck of that first one, and the thyroid lobes, and a 6-month-old lamb would be the size of an almond, maybe ½ inch long, ¼ inch wide, maybe a couple of millimeters thick. Well, these thyroid lobes, the 2 lobes in this lamb, were like big plums, 100 times bigger than they were supposed to be. So I knew the nitrates had been there a long chronic time because you get goiter from chronic low-grade nitrate poisoning. The question was, why did the 500 die in one night? Because if you have a flock of lambs, they're 6 months old, and they got goiter, you might have one die, And if you let them live, maybe in a month or two, another two will die or something like that. All of them aren't not going to die in one night. That's not typical of a thyroid issue. And so I checked with a farmer, and his granddaughter was doing a high-low temperature readings for her 4-H project for 3 months before they all died, and then a couple weeks afterwards. And it turns out that the temperature in central Missouri in the wintertime can be very high. It can be in the 80s if the wind is coming up from the Gulf up the Mississippi River. It's coming down the Mississippi River from Minnesota or Wisconsin or Michigan. It can be 19 degrees below zero. It turns out on the night they all died, the temperature dropped to 19. They all died of hypothermia, okay, because their thyroids weren't working, able to maintain their body temperature. And so I got it all ready for publication, and when the professors and everybody came back from the Christmas vacation, it's 1961, I'm 21 years old, and I said, okay, here I got this, and this, it's all ready for publication, may I be a co-author on it? He says, well, we didn't do anything, it's all yours. I said, well, I'm talking about protocol here, I'm a student. He said, no, you did the whole thing, you figured out this is yours. I said, wow, thank you, sir. So that was my first solo publication. I was a sole author on it, and I submitted it to veterinary journals and got it published, and I was so excited I gave copies to everybody, and I gave one copy to Marlon Perkins from the old Mutual Omaha Wild Kingdom show, who I'd worked with as a kid before I went to the university, all through high school and summer times during the university. And he got a $25 million grant from the National Institute of Health, from NIH. He got a $25 million grant to study pollution and deaths in zoo animals and pollution deaths in humans living around the big zoos, kind of looking for the canary in the mine sort of thing, where there's bound to be a species of animals in the zoo that was sensitive to the same pollutants as humans. And if they were to die, we knew to evacuate the cities. That was the whole purpose of that project. And so that was my first autopsies, big project. I actually got it published, and it resulted in a $25 million grant from NIH. So I'm very, very proud of that, and thankful to Marlon Perkins. He recognized the value of that thing. I didn't recognize the entire